Good evening. I'd like to call to order the February 3rd New Canaan Board of Education meeting. First on the agenda is to approve minutes. First up is January 16th minutes. I think we need to make an amendment.
Yeah, we need to make changes, sorry. Julie and Carl were not in attendance at that
Penny.
meeting. Penny, sorry. Did I say Julie?
Yeah.
Sorry, Penny. Sorry, Penny and Carl. You were here on the 16th?
Yeah.
So is it just Penny?
Just Penny.
Okay, okay, so
so.
I'm stand corrected again.
That was the meeting in the gym.
That was a meeting in the gym.
Oh,
Right. The 16th.
Oh, yeah, the 20.
It was the
Yeah, the
workshop.
auxiliary
You
meeting.
weren't there.
Okay.
Yeah, you called. Right,
Okay,
right.
okay, so Penny and Carl were not in attendance, so, yes, we just have to fix that in the minutes.
Yeah,
So we'll just
any
fix
meetings.
that, yeah.
Okay, is there a motion for the amendment? Brendan first, second. Sherry? All in favor? Okay. Now, is there a motion?
The amended agenda.
No, yes. Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Minutes.
Minutes. Jen, second. Brendan, all in favor? Okay. Moving on, the January 21st minutes. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? First, Sherry, second. Jen, all in favor? Okay, moving on to this evening's agenda. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda and just in light of the people that have joined us this evening to move up the school start and end times discussion ahead of the calendar discussion. Is there a motion for that amendment? Brendan, second. Carl, all in favor? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda? Julie, second. Deanna, all in favor? Okay. So now comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Is there anyone wishing to address the board?
Good evening. My name is Jennifer DeLippe. I feel like we're old friends at this point. To quote some of the output from Westport, the clear goals that Westport had outlined for start times optimizes the educational experience within the Westport school system, not start times. Promote the health, academic performance, and quality of life for students, staff, and families, not just a certain subset of students. Consider the needs and the impact on adjusting school start times for the broader Westport community, thought through unintended consequences. Recommended start times for Westport are falling between 8 and 9 for all schools, and it is a budget-neutral decision. Westport has 124 miles of public road and 66 miles of private roads. You can Google it. Yet this has not been used as an excuse for complications in coming up with an optimal plan. I've been in marketing for 27 years, and if I had to explain my optimizations as I took 50% of product and swapped it for another 50% of product, only to increase productivity for some, and not for all at the cost of $1 million, my boss would say, go back to the drawing board. And then if I recommended swapping out the 50% of the 50% of the poor placement because it sounds better, I would be fired. This is exactly what you're proposing. I don't know the magic of tonight and having to have this vote, but do the hard thing, do the right thing, and I thank you, Ms. Carlson, for voting, trying to change the vote on the budget with the start times at the time. But vote for the right effort and focus that has not been done tonight and get us the answers we need. We expect excellence from our children and teachers. They deserve the same back from us. Just how much will it cost to have students' start times fall somewhere between 8 and 9? What levers are needed to make it happen, like a new bus contract? And I remind you, I can't imagine what the magic is about tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Jack DeLippe, and I'm 10 years old, and I'm in 5th grade at SAC, and I love it there. I was worried when I was in 4th grade about how it would be, and I found it is amazing. Though it takes lots of work, I've made it into advanced math, and I'm learning 2 years in 1. That takes effort. This year, I had to make some hard decisions so I can have time for dinner, homework, and sleep. I crashed as soon as the lights go out at 8 o'clock, and I gave up Y-ball as the practices were too late, and I just gave up choir, too. I am hoping to go back soon. These were hard decisions to make. For the first time, I have have to be woken up by my parents. They say it is all the growing I'm doing physically and that what I am learning. My feet are bigger than my mom's. I wouldn't want to change anything as it all works. I can walk with my sister to school at South. We are actually far enough away to take the bus, but we like walking. I play football with my friends before school, blowing off jitters and meeting new people. I can go to after-school programs and have time for homework and see my parents. They both work. I can't imagine going so early that I can't help Margot or get ready for the day in my head. I can't imagine going so late that again I can't help her. I have to give up more of the things I love, like music and sports, and what I'm supposed to do in the morning until 9:15. My parents have a strict no screen rule during the week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is James Yao, and these two children over there, Max and Adeline, are my little kids who are starting East next year. I think in going through this process, some of the board might have forgotten what it is potentially to be parents of elementary school kids and may not be considering some of their needs as well. I'll just give you our story, but I'm sure it's not unique. Max actually just came up from wrestling downstairs. It's 7 o'clock, and if he gets home, he gets something to eat fast, he gets showered up. If he's lucky, he's going to get to bed at 8:30 or 9. With the optimal sleep required, being like 11 to 12 hours, he's going to be about 3 hours short of the sleep he's supposed to get. Now, I think that's just one of the issues, but if you also look at his little sister there, his little sister can't be sitting at home by herself, right? And Max isn't going to drive to the wrestling practice by himself. So they're kind of codependent. So she's along for the ride, something that maybe some members of the board don't recall having their kids go through. In addition to that, and as important, since none of the schools in the area seem to start earlier, the elementary schools seem to start earlier than 8 or 8:30, that means no after-school activity starts before 4:30, 5 o'clock at the earliest. So what you're essentially saying is most kids will be in the same boat as them. Max is going to go home, eat, shower, be in bed by 8:30, 9 o'clock hopefully, and be short 3 hours of sleep under the new schedule. In addition to that, Adeline, my little girl, who's very excited to start school next year, she has gymnastics. Also doesn't start until 5 o'clock. So there's no way for them to get the sleep they need. Now, some of you might have trouble relating to that since it was a while back. 3 hours short sleep is like having your high school kid go to sleep at 1 or 1:30 every night. I'm sure none of you would want that. And if they do go to sleep at 1 or 1:30, I'm sure you'll agree that they could probably handle that sleep deficiency better than my kids can, better than the kids
That's 2 minutes,
that are
sir.
their age. All right. I just want to wrap up in saying that I do wish the board would seriously consider the actions for the rest of the students in the town, which represent more than half. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, how you doing? Sean Sullivan. My son's going to go to SACS next year. Out of the mouths of babes. Good job, Jack. Brought up a pretty good important point. I have a lot of questions on the premise for why this is being done. To say high school kids need their sleep at the expense of younger kids that also need their sleep, or maybe they don't, at the cost of $1 million is questionable to me. I know I come at this a little bit late, but given the fact that I have a little bit of that much of a question and the fact that, you know, high school kids are pretty much adults at this point, at least when my son's 16, if he can't get his butt out of bed at 7, well, he's going to have to learn because, you know, that's the way of the world. So I don't necessarily know if I buy into the premise of the fact that we need to coddle the older kids, let them sleep in a little bit, get their rack time, when the world is in front of them pretty quick. And they're going to need to get up pretty early. So I think there's a lot of questions here, and I think it needs to be maybe slowed down a little bit, and some of those questions need to be answered. I don't necessarily know if this is a done deal yet. I don't necessarily know that if it's not a done deal, the money's been appropriated, where's it going to go if it's not a done deal? There's a lot of questions that I have. I don't know if this is Q&A, but found out about this last week and thought I'd kind of throw that out there. So in any event, thank you very much for listening to me. Good job.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Beth Reddington. I've been a teacher here for 26 years. I've taught at 3rd grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, and currently at 5th grade for quite some time. And I love what I hear. I'm very proud of you. I too am not, I'm into bang for the buck, for the money also, and I'm a little unsure where this is coming from. Any high school students I've talked to are not excited about a change. I don't understand how that would impact the many, someone told me 70% of our high schoolers play sports, so I didn't know that impact. Ice time would move, pool time would move. Would athletes get different schedules? Would they automatically in their season get a study hall at the end? But then if the study hall they lose, what does that do to their academics? Because I have yet to see any academic data that indicates we have a problem. And I would be concerned that maybe we would, if in some again, an unknown consequence that we haven't anticipated yet. I do understand the need for students to get more sleep. Part of me is like, well, for a lot less than $1 million, we could get time management teachers or professionals into the high school to teach our students. Let's empower them for the rest of the world. When they leave us, not just change the bus schedule. Let's give them tools that they can carry through life to help them beyond. And I believe that would be a lot less than $1 million and have such a ripple effect and unanticipated results throughout the district. The other thing is at SACs, a time where students, are really finding their way, their interests, quote unquote, fitting in. We have about 215 students that attend our after-school clubs. We have 26 after-school clubs, ranging from Trout Club, mock trial, math team, Model UN, hands-on art. We have so much that gives them opportunity, because at SACS we pride ourselves on connection and caring, fostering relationships, and helping validate students for who they are as individuals. And shifting, us to a 9:15 in particular makes that afternoon go away. Students who can't be driven, if we have to have morning clubs, fewer clubs will be available because fewer students,
Sorry, that's 2 minutes.
Okay, not everybody can be driven to school. So I say go for bang for the buck and look at this further. Thank you.
Hi, Amy Zinser. I have 3 children in the school system in 4th grade, 2nd grade, and kindergarten. I've sent my thoughts to you all previously in multiple emails, so I won't take up your time. I appreciate you've already read those emails. But I'm very concerned that not all of the stakeholders have been adequately prepped and consulted for this change, that there hasn't been enough time for fallback plans to come into place. In my family's particular situation, this change would mean a lot more time for my children at an after-school program, less time at home, less time in bed. And I'm not sure that there have been enough support systems put in place to help families like mine and all the other families that will suddenly have a deficit of childcare in the afternoon. The existing programs are not adequate. The YMCA is not prepared to take on that many extra students. So I'm just not sure where all these extra slots are supposed to come from. And I feel that there has not been enough lead time given for families and parents and programs to adjust. And I also have concerns about the financial aspects of all of this, how much more it's going to cost than was originally projected. And I just feel that this plan is so far from being perfect that we really should just take another step back and try to find something else that works for all of the families and children in our community. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. So we'll move right into our discussion on school start and end times. Dr. Letzi?
You sure you don't want to do the calendar? Thank you. And thank you to everyone who came out tonight and to share feedback. To the one question, Sean, it's not a Q&A, right? It's an opportunity to share different feedback, just so you know. But I think that as we talk about things a little bit, we'll be able to share some information that could be helpful, and always open to feedback in different ways. As you recall, at the last Board of Education meeting on the Tuesday after Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the board talked a bit about the scenario A in question and asked the administration to look at what it would take to flip the first and third tier to create what we called a scenario B. Since that conversation, and I can't go into as much detail about that as you like, but since that conversation, we've done quite a few things, and that you have that in front of you just as a quick kind of overview of sort of what's occurred. It's the Superintendent Board of Education budget proposal, communications plan regarding school start and end times. So if we just pick it up from that meeting on the bottom of the page, January 21st, since then, we've had a meeting with the full administrative council team. We've met with the Board of Selectmen as part of our budget presentation, discussed the initiative. We met with staff at East, at West, at South, and at SACs. Dr. Crenty and I had an opportunity to meet with students here at the high school during their lunch waves. We were here from about 11 to about 1:30. It was an open opportunity for students to come on in. So we sort of had 4 different sessions with them because we were thinking the 3 lunch waves, and then some came in even for the period after lunch, and we had that conversation. We had our Board of Education workshop together on Friday afternoon at 2:30, and then here we are today on the 3rd. So we've been very engaged in this process of sort of understanding impact, understanding perspective. As you know, what's not on here, and I should have put it on there, is that we administered the survey to the community last week. We had to close that out late last week so that we had an opportunity to pull the data and be able to share it with you, so that we could talk about it a bit tonight, and so we had time to share with you at the workshop as well. I guess to start, we'll start with the survey. As you'll recall, the survey was meant to be very brief, but just to try to capture some feedback in a way that could be helpful by using some of the same format and similar questions to the survey that was administered back in 2018. And just to refresh on that survey a little bit, and you have this in front of you. I only have these couple of slides just for folks that are here in the audience because we don't have enough copies. But back in 2018, we conducted a survey of parents, K-12, and students 7 through 12. And there are a couple of important findings that came from there. And so just to share, one of them is this on sleep itself. We asked folks about their own sleeping patterns and habits and what's currently happening with the schedule that we have. And as you take a look at that, you see the question, when do you or does your child usually go to bed on a school night? And it's about 2,000 responses there. You'll see that from 11 o'clock till 1 a.m. or later, what's that, 13, 23, 20, 45 or so % of our kids. So a pretty high percentage of the students overall. Then if you look to the right, you say, when do you or does your child usually wake up in the morning? And if you go from 6:30 back, you're in the mid-70s. So we're seeing that we've got students that are going to bed very late, a significant percentage of them, and students that are waking up early, a significant percentage of them. And so that shows down below that on a typical school night, how many hours of sleep do you get or does your child get? And then you see that it is close to 40% are reporting getting 6 hours or less sleep per night. So that, again, is one of the reasons why the board continued to do this work and to say, is there a better way for us to do this for all of our kids? On the next page is the slide, and I apologize if it's difficult to read, but is the slide that will mirror some of the ones I'm going to show you from the most recent survey. But we asked students and parents about the current schedule And we asked about the perception of the impact of the current schedule on a variety of dimensions in their experience. And we'll put this on the web for folks if they want to dig into it a little bit more. This actually already is, but we can repost. And what you'll see is that at the top, this is the percentage of responses that were positive or very positive. And at the top are things that folks felt the schedule was conducive to, was positive for. Things like participation in activities outside of school, personal time outside of school, time for homework, things like that. But as you go down, you see that only 25% or 24% said that the physical health and their emotional or mental health was positively impacted by the schedule that we currently have today. And again, I mention that only because that's a part of the reason why the board continued doing this work, the district continued doing the work, and we kept looking to see, is there a better way to do what we're doing? So this most recent survey, what we did was use almost the same dimensions. We made one change. Instead of having family routines, we split it up to say family routines in the morning, family routines in the evening, knowing that the scenario A or scenario B might have an impact on that. So as we look at the results going into this most recent, and I'm going to kind of move through, again, as quickly, you're welcome to stop me, but there's a bit to cover because we've been busy these last few weeks. So we had close to 900 respondents overall, and I want to say thank you to the community for your participation in that. It was a tight timeline, and folks really responded to that. A relatively balanced distribution of students across the district. As you see, we've got the largest from SACs, 5-6, because those are two grades isolated there, but you've got all of the schools represented. And when you look at the grades, we've got 10%, about 90 of the respondents had students in pre-K even, and going into kindergarten and across the grades. So at a quick snapshot, it appears to be representative. So as we go into the combined results, what I did here, just to try to, for discussion's sake, is put in the responses that were very positive, positive, or neutral. Because I think the folks that are responding neutral are saying that, obviously it's not negative. Anything that's not, just to try to be able to break it down. So these are combined across the elementary school, and SACs is pulled out in the slides, in the next slides below. So if you look at the physical health and then the emotional health, you see the numbers here. If you compare them to the one in the beginning, you're at 38% for physical health, and again, this is percentage of respondents who put down that it would have a very positive or positive impact on their child's life. Now, I'm diving in because I've been so deep in this for so long, but as I say, scenario A and scenario B, is everyone familiar? I don't need to recap that? Okay. All right, so we'll keep moving. You can keep looking down and seeing sort of where those responses are, again, combined across the 3 elementary schools. As you look at scenario B, you look down again, and you can see the responses. Again, this is aggregating all 3 schools. We had most respondents from East School, and then South was next, and then West was third. And again, I think you can see that. Yep, you can see that back on page 3. Where 30% of the respondents responded for East School, 27 for South, 24 from West. So you have, again, the combined responses. So on the positive side, regardless, either scenario is an improvement, perceived improvement, over the current schedule based on the data we received back in 2018. Looking at the two together, one against the other, there were more positive responses for the elementaries in the afternoon here. And again, I think you have the, scenario B. Mm-hmm. Yep. With an awful lot of sort of neutral in the middles, which makes sense, I think, with the East and West being 2/3 of the responses there. If we look over at SACs, you've got the scenario A, and again, scenario A has the 5th and 6th grade in the 3rd tier. And you have you can do the math there, you see the physical health at the top, and then the emotional health is the next one. And strong, favorable responses there by comparison, as you look over to scenario B over at SACs. And this is the one that had the 5th and 6th grade first thing in the morning, and has those lower scores there. So as you go deeper into the survey, you can see in your packet you have disaggregated by school, as you can sort of pull up, kind of look at it. And I think that you would find that you've got one school that feels strongly about one scenario, another school that feels strongly about another, and then you saw where SAC's lies, and then another school that's sort of a little bit in the middle, when they look at the impact specifically on physical health and then emotional and mental health. And thinking about, considering that was really our motivation going into this, as we thought about it in the beginning, that we agree our students are thriving on many, many measures. If we look academically, we look at the arts, we look athletically, but we are also concerned around student wellness and health in general, and being sure that the system we have is the best it can be for all of our kids across the grades. It is true that, of course, the science around adolescent sleep and sleep patterns, specifically the science that talks about it's both the number of hours of sleep that kids get and when they're asleep that matters. And I know the board's read quite a bit of research about all of that, and understanding that it's that shift in melatonin that occurs in adolescence that then shifts back as they move through college. And it's there's a window of sleep for a typical teen that exists around 4 o'clock, 4:30 to about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. That is where the most restorative sleep occurs for most kids. And when you look back on that first slide and see the significant percentage of students waking up before 6:30 in the morning, it indicates that our students are both not getting enough hours of sleep, but also not having the opportunity to sleep when their physiology is most calling for it. So just mentioning that in the broader context of the whole thing. I think that, and again, I know you've done an awful lot of research. As we look at feedback from different groups, the National Sleep Foundation, other groups that have engaged in this work, certainly feedback is that this is hard. It's difficult to kind of think about this, and these are challenging conversations. They talk about obstacles to changing around transportation, which is a big part of it because we have to be able to get the kids there, of course. We've been talking about that for quite some time. The concern around after-school activities, the concern about all the schools in the district. If you're going to move some, what happens to others? And you have existing time slots for a reason, and so who's going where is something that all districts sort of work through. Certainly, teachers' feedback around both their experiences and in and out of school is important. It's stressful for families, and I think the board certainly has been very respectful of that and understanding of that as we try to work through all of this. The education for the community is very important. We've worked to do that along the way as best we can. But change is hard for all stakeholder groups as well. So that's sort of the feedback from the National Sleep Foundation. They sort of outline they call it major obstacles that you would experience, and many of them are things that keep us up at night, as we're kind of working through this and thinking about it. So it's, I think to be expected that there'd be very strong feelings on all sides of this, based on experience. And as we've spoken with staff, one of the things we shared with them is that, one of the big challenges for everybody is that we've sort of already solved for the issues that our current schedule gives us, whether it's before school care, after school care. And as we think about changing that, it's daunting and it can be difficult. But that's why, again, I wanted to start by putting out the purpose, the why. Why are we continuing to do this and think about this work? The visits to the schools were very interesting, as they were last time. Dr. Cranton, I'm going to invite you to jump in and fill in. We took the show on the road again, and there was concern, I'll just start, that we heard across the elementaries for a schedule that starts and ends the third tier later than it does now. We heard some really good, interesting, specific feedback from folks. One in particular has stuck with me a bit, where a teacher shared that she teaches in the Park and Rec program in the morning before school, and then also teaches in the afternoon after school. So she's very involved with the kids sort of before, during, and after school, working with third and fourth grade, and shared that, you know, the difference is striking. That when she is with students in the morning at the 7:45, she said the work that they produce is sometimes better than what they produce in class a few hours later. She said they're engaged, they're active, it's a very productive time. Conversely, in the afternoon, you know, they start right after school there. She said it can be a struggle with kids, that they are tired as they go into that next transition after the school day. And the teacher sitting next to her actually shared that she used to teach in the afternoon. She doesn't do it anymore because it's just too much of a challenge. So just specific feedback around, you know, one person's experience, but I found it interesting to note because it's so direct. Teachers shared that the readiness for student learning is greatest in the morning. We have some data for you that we were collecting around early releases and tardies. And this is only just in. So you can take a look at your convenience around those things. But of note was the number of students who are coming to school at East and West at 7:45. And I don't think South has anything in the morning.
No.
Before that, no. So, you know, at East and West, we have some tardies, we have some early releases, and you can see, this is just a snapshot as of last week, you know, the end of the week last week, you can see. And you can see sort of how the numbers flow from that. But of note, I think, is that over at West, there are approximately 125 students or so who are coming in pretty regularly around 7:45. And at East, there's a few more, maybe 130, that are coming in. We run the Park and Rec programs at 7:45. We have the Early Bird program that we run as a school at 7:45. And there's orchestra, I think, once a week. I'm not sure if it's Friday at both schools or exactly how it works. But
2 different days.
2 different days, yeah, because it's one person.
So that's around 25%?
It's around 25%, yeah.
But that's not every day.
Orchestra's Friday. The other programs are Monday through Thursday, I believe, right?
You
Right.
pick and choose.
And Early Bird is every day. So 56 students over East, and there are a little fewer than 20 over West. Okay. So just, again, data points. On the, and again, you see the tardies over at Southeast, West, and can compare those numbers as well. I only just received the SACS numbers, but you're welcome to take a look at that as well. And again, it's just to date, early releases and tardies. The other feedback from our staff, Dr. Krenti.
I would just have to say that I thought the teachers were incredibly thoughtful. They asked really great questions. Some of them had heard the presentation more than once and still came back to ask good questions about the research. They were incredibly thoughtful, and they truly were trying to put the students first. You know, they all, like families, they too have families, and they too have struggles in trying to figure out all the childcare issues and all the other things because their schedule works for them now. But I do have to say that the teachers truly put that aside and were really asking good questions and sharing good feedback with Dr. Lutzy and I about what a student's day is like. And that was consistent across the 3 elementary schools as well as the SAC staff that we met with as well. So they were very thoughtful. They talked a little bit about what their schedules look like. They gave us feedback about how the students are in the morning. They gave us feedback of how the students are in the late afternoons. They did talk once again about that difficulty in teaching those late afternoon blocks and the struggles that they have when they're trying to implement those core academics. And that they do try to rotate that schedule around. They do try to have flexibility with what they put in the afternoon. But it's a challenge for them. And there were concerns about moving later than where they're currently dismissing, especially, with East and West. But I do think we heard that K-6. That was the majority of the SAC staff that was there, was the 5th and 6th grade teachers. But we heard that the afternoons, whether it's, 3 o'clock at an elementary school or whether it's period 8 or 9 at a middle school.
that those afternoon blocks of time are challenging.
I mentioned that we also spent some time with the students here at the high school. And for the students, as they came in, there was concern around what could be lost if the change were made. There was some misunderstanding about kind of practices and sports and how that would be managed and morning practices. And we shared with them in the conversation a bit that, the sports where we don't control the venue, so the ice hockey, swimming, some others, we have to problem solve around that. We don't know what the answer is going to be, but no one would say that practice at 5:45 right now is ideal either. So we've got to look at it and try to figure out the best way to do that. But we can also say that practices and sports where we do control the venue, so field sports, gym sports, others, the goal would be not to have practices before school, and certainly that would be that would not be the ideal. The goal would be to have the practices in the afternoon and to do that. So we can't speak necessarily to those that we don't have control over the venue. If it's a hockey rink, if it's a swimming pool, we've got to figure out how to do that, just like we have to figure out today how to do that. But the communication certainly to the coaches and others has been that the goal would be to have the practices would be in the afternoon, and we'd try to work through each of those issues as they arise. And that's, as I know we've talked about, having an implementation committee and others that would meet to start planning this out as early as possible, start anticipating what consequences could be, what impacts could be, and how best to resolve those issues as they come up. But perfectly understandable. It was great conversation. There were a few that shared that they're looking forward to the change and shared some reasons why. I'd say the majority did not look favorably upon the change, but to their credit, as you would expect, they were open-minded, they were thoughtful, they were receptive. They really, I think, appreciated that the purpose behind this and why the board and district has been engaged in this, and having an opportunity to share with them the science around sleep and its purpose and all of those things, I think went a long way. So that was a good conversation with them. As you know, on Friday we met with Roy Walder as well, our transportation specialist expert, and he shared with us sort of the build out of scenario B. So after getting the feedback, sort of the concept, he built it out as quickly as he could for us to be able to at least have the conversation. And again, scenario B is where the 3 elementaries are in the afternoon, 5, 6 in the morning. And as he shared, he has some concerns about the pickup time for the 5th and 6th grade in that scenario, because we would no longer be capturing the efficiency of having the neighborhood schools, so those rides would be a bit longer coming in. So it does look like the first child would have to be picked up prior to 7 o'clock in the morning. Getting the buses back to the elementary schools at the end of the day are a challenge, because from the time the bell rings at 7 through 12, there's about 10 minutes, 12 minutes for students to leave the building, board the buses, and then the buses roll, which is different than many of the elementaries where, so if the day ends at 3:35, kids are getting on the buses at that point, and it doesn't take quite as long. So that, having that time and then having a large tier at the end of the day means that you have quite a few buses that are going to each of the schools after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it'd be I think that it was up to 4:03, 4:05 for some of those buses to be arriving at the elementary schools for that ride out. Again, he's building it based on what we have currently and what we know, but that was another just logistical challenge around that. And then the concern that was shared in the meeting a little bit and discussed a bit was that often the 5th and 6th grade students' activities can run late in the evening, that some of the things that they participate in might go till 9 o'clock, getting home around 9:30. So there was some question about having them on the very first tier, if that works. And then the last was about children beginning to transition to sleeping later in 5th and 6th grade. Some parents had shared some feedback about that. So one last piece, as you know, at the workshop, we discussed working with a consultant as an external review kind of the work that we're doing, looking at the routes, trying to build them from the ground up. We thought it was a great suggestion, so thank you for that. So just this afternoon, we spoke with a company that's been working on bus routing and school start time for a good couple of years and been doing it in districts, large districts, small districts, suburban, urban, others. It's a small company, but it looks like they do quite a bit of work, and they've got got some experience, I think, that will be helpful for us in this. So it was great conversation. We shared an overview of our process. We shared our constraints and our considerations, the things that sort of define us and the challenge around the transportation here. Most importantly, we shared with them what our goals are and talked to them about sort of, given some constraints, could you build the routes from the ground up, as we discussed, so that we could then compare those against the routes that we have to look and see, what's the best thinking. So not just hand over the routes and say, are we doing it right? But here's the information, here's the data, here, have them put it into their system and work with all of that. So depending upon tonight's conversation, I wanted to share that we've got that lined up. And if we give them the go-ahead, we'd expect a contract in the next day or so with some deliverables and be able to move on that over the course of February. We probably should be able to report out by the first meeting in March. It was heartening in the conversation with him a bit to hear that even tonight he was working on a presentation that he's going to go give to another district where this is the challenge, is around if one school moves into a different time slot, where do the other schools go and why? That is sort of the ripple effect. And we promised him that, or shared with him that we don't engage in magical thinking. We can't just say everyone's going to go to school at the same time and then try to figure that out. It just doesn't work. So this is a conversation for all districts that are making this change, sort of struggling to figure out, given the specifics of their environment and the schools and where they are, what should go where. So I think that catches us up sort of on the work that we've been doing over the last week and a half or so. We're open for questions and look forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lutzy. Yep. Any feedback or thoughts on the two scenarios?
So thank you, Dr. Lutzy, for all of that. And we so appreciate all the feedback from the community, clearly. This has been a super difficult process. I think we're all trying to do the right thing for all kids. When I initially voted to have the high school start later, what really turned me was hearing from the medical research. That was just a big turning point for me. And I think that because of that, after all the feedback from the community, but then also the research, I feel like I personally think that the elementary schools in the morning just makes more sense. Just because of the learning with the teachers talking about the afternoons and how difficult it is to get kids to listen and to learn and to be engaged, and speaking to a lot of parents about when my kids were all young, they were all the first ones up and whatever. So I'm not sure. I know we're not voting or anything, but I'm really psyched that we have a consultant coming in and that's going to build this up from the ground up, and it'd be like a miracle if they could find some minutes on there that could just help us out a little bit, maybe bump the time up a little bit from 7:45, because I know it definitely seems early. But, in doing that, you do capture the efficiencies of the busing, because, the first pickup would be 7:06 versus if it was 5-6, it would still be like in the 6s somewhere. I'm not really sure what the time is. But, so I am excited about the consultant. I think that's a really great idea. And everything else, once this is all said and done, it's still going to be a work in progress. So the community's going to have, I know that, they're talking about childcare and not having enough childcare and all this stuff. So I guess this is just one step in the whole process. But I would like to, I would like to see more, I guess the build out done from scenario A. I'm so confused at this point with the A's and the B's. But the elementary is at 7:45.
Sure.
Hopefully later, 11.
Right. Thanks, John.
Diana?
So I don't really have an opinion on either scenario. I think there needs to be more work, and I made that clear at the last meeting. So I don't know that either scenario is optimized. But I would encourage the administration to bring in board members and community members to meet with that consultant, so that you are bringing in other perspectives as you're building out those scenarios, because I think there's value in hearing other people's perspectives. I think teachers should also a couple of teachers should be brought in to work with that consultant, because I think everybody brings a little bit of a different piece of information to the table and could help people look at things from a different perspective. So I would encourage others to be brought into that process with the consultant.
Okay, thank you. Carl?
Just a question on this consultant. I know there was a consultant hired a year ago or over a year ago.
Yeah, 2.
Doing preliminary work, looking at the schedule and what it would take. So how is this consultant different? How does it vary from the other consultant in terms of skills, expertise, perspectives? And is the remit different from what you asked them?
Sorry,
Is the mandate different from what you asked them to do?
Sure.
a couple
So
years
yeah,
ago?
the group that worked with us before, TAS, they did a fine job. One of the tasks that we laid before them was to check on the optimization of our current routes. So they spent quite a bit of time understanding what we're currently doing, the resource needs, how the buses are running, and generally going into this, we were hoping that they would be able to optimize our routes beyond where they were and find us 15 minutes or so that we could start to use and to work with. It was a blessing and a curse to get the feedback that there's no time in our schedule because it is so highly optimized, because Roy has really fine-tuned it through the years. But TAS spent quite a bit of time sort of looking at our riderships, looking at the current structure, and looking for ways to improve that. We did also task them with developing a couple of options to look at to get the conversation going, and they did that with us, and that's all available on the website as well. They put a couple of high level, as they looked at it. They didn't do the routing to the level that Roy is doing it now for us. As Roy's building those out, we was doing the student by student. So we didn't have them and didn't task them to get to that level of specificity. With the new group that we're talking with, and I don't know that it's a deeper or better skill set. I think it's good to have another view, another group take a look at it. And really, we're asking them to build the routes themselves with a few guiding principles from the ground up. Instead of looking at what we're doing and trying to optimize that, we'll give them a few, 2, 3 guiding principles, give them all the data and information that they need on the resources we have and the needs that we have, and see what they come up with. So that's different than what we had asked TAS to do. We also had TAS do a traffic study for us, and that actually yielded some time for us in that they made some suggestions about the stopping the traffic and coordinating the lights at dismissal as the buses are leaving the lot here at the high school. And they started talking a bit about the road through Waveney, which is now, as I understand it, still in the works and underway for the spring, which will be helpful as another way to move some traffic out of the South and Farm intersection in the mornings and try to gain a few minutes that way too. So.
And will they look at the optimization software that's currently in use by the school system? There's, I think, about 20 different.
There's a couple of different
bus
packages. Yeah,
optimization
they have
software.
a couple that they're most familiar with. So what we'll wind up doing really is working with the company that we use to export the data for them, and then they'll import it into their own system, and then we'll work with them for any information they need that they're not able to grab. So if it's some specifics, they'll need our policies to understand walking distance. They would need to know about crossing state roads and those things. Some of the rules and regulations we have as our policies. So they'll take a dump of the data, put it into their own system, and then we'll have to give them other information that they'll need, and then they'll run it themselves. And some of it is automated. A lot of it's still manual, as they're going through to try to build out these runs. But that's just sort of how it works, no matter how you do it. There's not a system that you can just put it all in, press a button, and have the routes come out. There's quite a bit of kind of knowledge that goes into it too.
Brendan?
Yeah, I'd like to also express my support for scenario A, the elementary schools going first. I do think, I agree with Jen that, based on all the feedback that we've gotten, and we've gotten a lot more in the last couple of weeks, which has been, really helpful. But the feedback that elementary school kids, learn better earlier in the day is, for me, what I think is probably most important. I do think that having all 3 elementary schools in the same tier is important. I realize we're, in either scenario, we're in that, we're in that option. Although people have thrown out lots of different, through their feedback, have thrown out lots of different options. I do think having all 3 on one tier is important to optimize activities, mainly after school. And I think although we have a lot of work to do to actually, operationalize this, my hope is that through the consultant or otherwise, we can, we can shift that 7:45 a little bit later. If we can't, I still think it's optimal to have the elementary schools first. And I do think as a community, and I agree with Deanna that we should as a board be very involved, not just with the consultant, but with the community and bringing everybody together, to solve challenges that many people have outlined, whether it's, before or after school care, athletics, a number of other things, transportation, et cetera. So I, wholeheartedly support A. I know it's really challenging to deal with change, and there are a number of families who, this won't work for, or at least the perception initially is that it will not work. But we as a board have done a ton of work looking at a number of different scenarios. And not just, as Brian said earlier, not just for the sake of, changing high school start times. This is for, a much broader cause of trying to do its best for all of our kids to optimize health and wellness. And it's also optimizing health and wellness, sorry for rambling on, is not just about start times and end times. It's about the school day. It's about, homework and, aggregate levels of schoolwork. It's about lots of different things. So this is one piece of, a lot of different things that the school system's doing. So, sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Julie?
I'm just curious, Brian, and I don't know if you have this data or not, but in terms of the Westport schools, I know they're half hour, there's a half hour between each of the start times, the elementary, middle, and high school. Do you know, I had not heard that statistic of the number of roads or the number of miles in Westport, but do you know, do they just have, I mean, I know they have more students, do they just have that many more buses? So they already are starting at a baseline of more buses, and so they're able to do the half hour in between runs? Is that how that works, and why the change is it's cost neutral for them?
Sure. And, I've been so deep analyzing New Canaan, I haven't
Right.
asked
Yes,
the questions,
I
and I'm glad to.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sort of guess. I do know they have more schools than us and more neighborhood schools. They had two middle schools up until this year where they had to close one, and they'll be reopening that. Where we have one large elementary that goes 5 through 8, as you know, so I think that's maybe a challenge that we have that others don't. It can be location of the schools in the town, the fact that we've got the high school, SACs, and South here on the southern side of town. Could be. I'd have to, but I'd be glad to talk to my friend and colleague over there in Westport, and I'll share that with the board. I'd be glad to.
Penny?
I just wanted to say I think it's a great idea to bring in another consultant just to double check this, to give us, so we know we have the best data, and I would support them looking at the scenario A. I've read all the feedback. I appreciate all the time and effort that citizens and teachers have taken to give us their best perspectives on what's best for their families and for the students. It is really difficult. It's easy to pose the question. It's not really easy to answer it because there's so many different factors. And I think as we work on what we can get out of our buses in another 5 or 10 minutes, it would be huge. I think we should also continue working on creating the ecosystem that would best support scenario A in more detail, because I think people have raised really good questions about after-school care, about for the elementary, about before-school care for 5 and 6, that we need to talk to all the different groups in town and start really sketching it out so that people can see how it would work. And I know it's going to be difficult for some families. And I just think that you have to, it's the research, it's, the recommendations from the doctors, from the CDC, and the brain research that's all gone, come forward so much in the last 15, 20 years, I guess 15 years since this district considered this issue before. That is compelling to me. But I think we just have to keep working and tweaking and getting feedback, and that would be where I am now.
Thank you. Sherry?
So, Brian, first of all, I just want to say that applaud the administration and the board that we've continued to keep like the student interest at the forefront of our analysis. I'm just not at a point yet where I'm comfortable with the scenario A because of the early pickup times for the elementary. I'm wondering if it's possible, and I also am excited that we're bringing in the external consultant to give us a second opinion on the route optimization. If they could look at both scenarios and report back to us, if that's possible. I agree there are a lot of compelling reasons as to why the elementary would go earlier. I mean, we've heard the research and the teachers' input that, that really is the optimal learning time for the younger students. We also capture more of the pickup efficiency in the morning. And we already do have a quarter of the elementary school students that are coming in for the early bird, but I'm not there yet. I'm not comfortable with seeing, for an elementary student having a pickup time of 7:06. Even though I know the average is 7:15, I'm just wondering if we could have that consultant look at both scenarios. And if he can report back as early as March, which is what you indicated, that would still give us time to continue working this through the process in a timely manner.
Well, if the board wants, I certainly could talk to them about doing both. I don't know if that can be done by March. I mean, the anticipation was around 80 hours to do, what Roy's been doing because it's new for them. If that doubles that time, that could be challenging, but I'm glad to talk to them about it, and I'll report back.
Okay. Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that we give, adequate notice and guidance to the community in making a decision on what we want to do, because we're all at the beginning of February right now, and people do have to make decisions about what happens next year. So, I understand the request for more analysis. I do think we need to give the community direction on where we're headed.
Diana?
So I appreciate the giving the community more time and direction, but I guess my response to that was my whole issue last week, is that we really will not know until April if we're getting the funding from the Board of Finance and Town Council and the town body. So we can go down any road and everything could change in April because of, decisions that are made outside of our control. So I would also agree with Sherry that I would urge the, consultant to continue down both paths. I too am struggling because I think 7:45 is too early. There's not a single district in Lower Fairfield County that starts before 8 as a public school. In a traditional elementary school, I know one, Westport, starts at 7:40, but not until they're in second grade. Wilton, sorry.
Third through fifth.
So I think it is, we talked about transitions. I think, bringing the elementary schools to 7:45 adds a transition now. So, they start at 9 in elementary school, then they go back to 7:45, and then they go back to 9:30, then they go back to 8:30. So we talked about all these transitions, and now we're looking at a scenario that adds a transition back to our kids. And also, I do look at the parent feedback. And, while I appreciate, Brian, that you said 39% of our students aren't getting enough sleep, 61% of our students are getting over 7 hours of sleep a day. So that's what the chart says. So, that's what started this off. 61% of our students are getting 7 hours or more. So, before we make this, and a 9:15 start, while I appreciate the tiredness, and I did read all the teacher feedback about, their kids and things like that, we've done an excellent job at East and West programming so that they're doing phenomenally well on all their academic, markers. So I don't know if we're making it so that most of the, rigorous academics are in the morning, so that, I don't know, but we're doing something right, because the 9:05 start, moving to 9:15, to me, 10 minutes is not ideal, but it's 10 minutes at the end of the day. So, and, you know, when I look at the combined elementary feedback on, you know, the impacts of scenario A for the parents, and, you know, they believe, or sorry, for scenario B, which is where the elementaries would start at 9:15, there is a larger percentage of parents think that the physical and mental and emotional well-being of their children will be optimized with the later elementary start. You know, I agree with you. We all are more comfortable with what we're used to, and but we are asking for a massive change in this community, and we have 2 schools that already start at 9:05. So, you know, I would just echo Sherry's. I think it's important to keep the consultant moving forward on both fronts so that we understand, because I'm not comfortable right now.
Julie?
I also echo the idea of having more research done. The one thing I would say, and actually it's coming from a personal observation, when my kids were in elementary school, about I mean, I agree with you totally, Deanna, like East and West have done, you know, phenomenally well. Doesn't seem, the later end time doesn't seem to be a detriment there. But the playtime is something that's lost, and to me that's part of the social and emotional well-being for our younger kids. And one thing that, I mean, we adored East School, but I must say I always wish that my kids got out of school earlier, because by the time they would get home, it would be 4 o'clock, and they were tired, especially in the wintertime. It was dark pretty soon, and it just felt like there was less playtime. So, again, this is putting my personal spin on it, but I like the idea that the elementary kids, 7:45 does seem too early to me, but I love the idea that they're out early enough that they have time to play and have that sort of downtime that I think you lose a little bit of if they get out of school closer to, you know, 3:45.
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I guess, you know, I feel very similar. I know it feels like we're in a bit of an analysis paralysis here, going back and forth, and I don't have the answer. I do feel having another set of eyes on the transportation would be great. As far as the order, I'm not too sure yet. I think probably elementary going early. My kids went to South, so they went earlier, so that's all I know. And it worked fine for us. I don't like 7:45. I said that in the past. I think it's too early. I don't know, you know, I think 15 minutes, stealing 15 minutes from here and pushing things around a little bit would go a long way, and that might, you know, make more people happy. So I think that's kind of where I'm at as well. I would like to see what they can come up with, because right now it's kind of clear as mud.
Okay. I would just add, my 2 cents would be, I do think the consultant plays an important role in this, and that I think the challenge we need to put to them is how close can we get to 8 a.m.? Because I think what we hear consistently from all the feedback is, you know, no school should start before 8 a.m., so how close can we get? And if we can squeeze the system a little bit and we can find some minutes, I think we make a lot of progress. And I think it becomes clear that scenario B has a lot of challenges with it, and, you know, we don't achieve the elementary schools on the same schedule. It keeps, you know, it drives a bigger wedge in between the times that the
Not scenario B. Scenario B puts the
scenario
3
B, sorry,
on
yes.
the third tier.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other questions I would have for the consultant are just to come up with some creative ways that we could look at morning transportation options for grades 5 and 6. If they do go scenario A, you know, how else could they get to school? Same for 7 through 12. We talk a lot about, you know, things that might be happening before school for the later start time children, and, you know, how can we take advantage of our bus routing to get them to school easier? And, you know, the other things that have been echoed tonight, which are the before and after school programs and the athletics. And I think those are areas that we would spend I would say are high priority areas to begin in terms of implementation, to spend a lot of time to begin partnering with the community, with sports organizations at all levels for children K to 12, religious organizations, all those areas that where our kids spend all their time before and after school, and really think about how we can problem solve together. So I would favor scenario A, but with a lot of work on trying to improve that early start time. So, okay.
Can we get a commitment to add board members and maybe elementary and 5th, 6th parents? Because, I think it's important to have those voices in the room with the consultant.
I think, Brian, could you clarify the role of the consultant? Is this more like data-driven, or is it?
It is. As we think
group-driven?
back to TAS, we actually had about 2.5, 3 days of meetings, if you recall, with board members, with parents, with teachers, with don't think students, because it was in August, but we had quite a few meetings with them, given their task. I do think that certainly in speaking with him today, it was one preliminary conversation, it will be about dumping the data and having them churn through that data to try to optimize the solution or the scenario that we put in front of them, right, on the transportation side. He is, we've already spoken about him coming to New Canaan, sharing the results, going through it with everyone. But if there's other feedback around, I'm certainly happy to talk to him about it tomorrow and to find out if there are entry points for other things. But I do think it's really about looking at the data. Here are the parameters. Here's the town. Here's every road, every stoplight, every stop sign. Here are the speed limits. Sort of really getting that granular. Here are the homes where everybody lives, and he's not going to do every stop necessarily in our conversation, but he would do kind of first stop and then the length of the run for the last stop, and then the getting back to the school. So I do think it'll be a similar process that he's used with other districts up in Massachusetts and New Jersey and Colorado and other spots. And so, I'm glad to try to identify kind of through lines for communication, but I don't, if we are giving him sort of those initial parameters to work within, then I do think that generally, my thinking at least, was it's going to be more about just looking at the numbers and looking at the data. But you might have something else.
So are the parameters, what kind of parameters are you going to be giving the consultant?
Sure. So, really we'd be looking at, so we talked about scenario A and we talked about scenario B. So one would be to build a scenario that takes our 7 through 12 and puts it at or around 8:30, and put the elementaries in the first and the 5, 6 in the last, and see what you can do with that. And see what the timing is, what the length of bus routes are, sort of build around that. So giving enough leeway so that if 8:25 works better for some reason for 7:12, then that's something to talk about and to consider. And we've been saying that the times we're using are based on our kind of best understanding right now, but sort of not conservative estimates, but not aggressive either. This is just as we build it out. So we've asked for a plus minus few minutes on all of this from the start. But they'd be looking at, so like that would be one. So here's all the data, here's what we're thinking, here's the order of things, and putting this in the middle at around that 8:30 time, what's the best you can do? And just let them go through and build. Another would be, if with the scenario B, would just be flipping the first and third, but leaving the others in the middle. And again, what's the best you can do? And letting them come back to us with here's what they've built. Now, there's some pieces of information that our transportation department will have to share. For instance, as Roy mentioned a couple of them at our meeting on Friday, and things like the Board of Education policy around students not being permitted to cross state roads. Like that's something that we feel strongly about. It's a safety issue, and we'll need to make sure that they know about all of those things as they're doing it, so that whatever we get is going to work in town, in the real world.
Carl.
So I totally agree that getting kids from their homes to their houses at an appointed hour and home again is a pure data optimization problem with regard to the school day. I do think, whether it's on this go-round or somewhere down the road, that we should take in feedback from other folks or share with them the letters that we've received and issues that, we can catalog the issues that people have in terms of getting their kids to school early or getting them home afterwards, depending on when they work. And, to view this bus resource as a resource, and how do we use this resource, we're paying for it as hard as we can, to provide the best service to the families here. I mean, this board's done a great job tackling healthcare problem, tackling energy problems. I think now's the time for transportation.
We're still working on the other ones, too.
Jerry?
So I just want to add on to what Carl was saying, that I do think that, I respect that it's a manual process in that there's a lot to know about the local area and the roads. But at the same time, I do think we need to make sure we're giving the consultant a level of independence so that he can kind of break down any old paradigms and kind of rethink. Because there's some things, when you really drill down in the details, that I'm sure there are reasons why we, have certain things, like, there's a pickup at 7:06, but it doesn't run, and it's got deadhead time, but it doesn't run a second bus. So there's things in here that I would just like the consultant to just rethink and break down old paradigms to see if, we can gain some optimization in the schedule. I mean, I know we're all hoping, to gain some time, but I just really think that he needs to have a level of independence to be able to get there and not necessarily be told all of the inputs.
Right.
To get
and that's our goal.
To get a
right?
different
Not,
output.
We're going to give what he needs to do what he has to do without sort of moving one way or the other. I'll give you a good, for example, we talk a bit about how if school starts at 7:45, what time should students be dropped off? Is it 7:35? Is it 7:40? Is it 7:30? It depends upon. It's a conversation for us to have a little bit, and to maybe we'll allow them to sort of come back with some feedback about that. The high school, for instance, is a big building, so you wouldn't want to drop students off with only 5 minutes to get off the bus and get to their class. They'll be late every day. Is 10 minutes the right time, or is 15 minutes the right amount of time? Those, because again, we get caught in school start and end times, but bus times are different. Right, because the buses don't just drop off and the kids magically appear in class. You've got to give them time to travel. But you also have to be cognizant of the age of the kids, so you don't want to drop little guys off too early where they have too much free time, because that also means they're getting picked up earlier than they need to be. So those, we'll process that through with them as we have to, as some of the sort of parameters or principles around this. But we're not going to give them our current runs. We'll let them build the runs themselves based on kids and buses and what have you. So yeah, we're going to be very, and again, he's done this before, so they know what to ask for. We've already asked for that list of things.
So I guess one of the things I'd like to ask the consultants, we had a certain number of buses built into our current budget based upon the analysis that we've done. And but if for some reason we didn't get that number right, and a different number would mean something, then I would like to know that from the consultant as well.
We said that to him today.
Okay. So, I just
again,
don't want,
trying to minimize
we're
constraints.
Right.
If they were to come back and say you need fewer or you need more or whatever, we want to know that. Right. We don't want to put that on as a constraint. And that is in part why the March deadline was important, because the Board of Finance hasn't taken action at that point in the discussion, and it'd be good information to bring forward if it does come that way. But we have already had that, we had that conversation with them.
Terrific. Yeah. If there's anything
We're
terrific
anticipating
in this
your
process.
questions a little. Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Thank you.
I would just, that is, I think that would be useful to do. If you look at the runs that exist now, you can look at them, some of them just seem odd. For example, maybe there's some reason for it.
Right.
One bus has 40 students on it, another has 10. So maybe there's a good reason for that, maybe there's not. So just revisiting the whole thing, it seems like this has a lot of merit. And I'll give a specific example of, using the resource in out-of-the-box way. If we do go with 5th, 6th as the last run, that's the smallest number of kids, so that should free up buses to do other things. For example, to take some of the other kids home from after-school activities, for example. And so those are, things that we should ask them to consider at the appropriate time.
Sure.
Okay. So I think, based on what we're hearing, it sounds like scenario A is a priority for the consultants, and then to the extent that they could potentially look at moving things around to accommodate a scenario B option as well. Is that consistent?
Sounds right.
Everybody? Sounds right? Okay.
Okay. Glad to do it.
Okay.
All right, thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, we've worked really hard in the district, as you know, and I want to commend each of you. 'Cause
I think
know
that's an
this is-
understatement.
That's all right. But no, you've done yeoman's work in really understanding all of this, and, you know, it gets tricky to try to sum up and encapsulate 3 years of sort of study and work and whatever, so we keep doing that. And I know I need to go to the website and update that a little bit because of what we've done over the last few weeks, so we'll be doing that in the next couple of days too. If anybody wants to learn more, that'll be there.
Okay. And I would just like to add to that, just a thank you to the community, because the amount of feedback we've received has been immense, and it's extremely useful, because I think we've really seen and now understand this, the perspective that everyone has, you know, from across all ages, across all schools and neighborhoods, working, not working. So it's been extremely useful. Doesn't make it easier, but I think it's been very valuable, and I think our goal as a board is just to make this as inclusive as possible, and we feel like, you know, hearing from everybody has been really valuable to this process, so thank you. So moving on to our calendar discussion. Back to you, Dr. Lutzy.
All right. You have in front of you the 2019-2020 calendar. I wanted to speak with you briefly because I had one of those nights where I woke up at 3 in the morning thinking that this year is a lot like the weather pattern that we had a couple of years ago, where we were moving through January and felt pretty good about it. And then as March came, we wound up having a snowed day, a cancellation just about once a week, and it threw everything. We didn't have time to get together and meet. We had to try to pull together some plans and the communication. So I thought, let's be proactive just in case, and maybe if we talk about it and plan for it, it won't happen. So that's the hope. So what we have, and if you look at the calendar, if you look at June, the Thursday, the 18th, is currently our last day of school. We've had one snow day, as you'll recall, on December 17th. We do 182 days of school per year, as you know, so we are mandated by the state to do 180. So I'll share with you what past practice has been, but I just want to open it up to see if you have any other feedback, or if you'd like us to look at it any differently. If we have one more snow day, we would use Friday the 19th. The other important consideration I should have mentioned is Board of Education has a policy that encourages the administration to not go beyond the Friday of the third full week in June. And I've had conversations with folks around what a full week is. I've made the decision a full week is when we have 5 days of school, not when if the first were on, you know, some were saying that that's not a full week. I think it is. All right, so in the spirit of what we're saying, the third full week. So the end of the third full week would be June 19th. So if we have one more day, we're okay, according to what we've done in the past. If we have 2 more days, then what we've done in the past is reduce the student year to 181 days, and then teachers would come back on the 22nd to do their final day. If we had 2 more days, we would reduce to 180 days with our students, and then teachers would return on the 22nd and the 23rd, okay, to do their full contingent of days. Now, hopefully this wouldn't happen, but if we have 4 days, the question, what we've done in the past, now we would go to the 19th, but we'd still be a day short, so we would look to take it out of the April break. Now, the nuance this year around that is the April break begins with Easter weekend, so the 10th is Good Friday, so that's a holiday. The 12th is Easter Sunday, so I guess I'd like your feedback on whether we should, if we have to do this, look at beginning with the 17th at the end of the week and working backwards from Friday. Typically, we'd start with Monday and work forward, but since it's Easter weekend, if people are traveling and have plans, it seems to make sense to go to the 17th. But again, I wanted to check all of that with you to be sure that you're comfortable with it.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyone? Okay. All right. Makes sense.
Okay. So now that we've discussed it, hopefully it won't happen.
Great.
All right.
No more snow.
Beautiful. Thank you. And then.
Okay, and then capital moving on to the capital budget update with Dr. Keating.
Thank you. There are two updates that we wanted to share with you tonight. One involves the cogen budget, and the other is an update on the bidding for the east roof. So to start with the cogen, we've been working with our consultant, Van Zelm, for the last several months on these particular projects. And as you recall, in the original budget, we had money in for both the high school and SACs. And in talking it through with them, they really feel that the feasibility of successfully completing 2 projects this summer would be very difficult. And we can't really go much farther beyond the summer because we rely on we have to power up the buildings. And that's what a cogen would do. It would replace our current source of energy. So we decided that SACs would be the first building to start with, and made sense because we have the boilers on schedule to be replaced. So they updated the numbers for both scenarios. We pushed the high school out to next year, and the documents that you have in front of you tonight reflect that. So we just wanted to share that with you.
Okay. And just while we're looking at the page, before we go to the roof, I just want to mention we've had some excitement about the planetarium. I want to say that we've had some very good press coverage, but also I had some meeting with some parents this morning, and they were very excited to talk about the planetarium and some options for fundraising and trying to get that off the ground. So I saw it there. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
Oh, question?
Yeah.
So did we get a revised bid? I noticed in our original budget documents, the cogen at SACs was 900, and now it's in at 775.
Right, so one of the things we did was we took a close look at the load with the consultant. We have a couple of projects that are coming on. We have an LED light replacement project at both SACs and the high school, which is going to reduce the load significantly. And we had sized it at peak, and we're sizing it just below peak so that we don't oversize the units that we're purchasing. All right, and as far as the east roof goes, we did open bids on Friday. The good news is that we are within our budget. The low bidder, just on the roof portion of it, it came in at $1,386,000. In addition to that, the roofing number base bid, we do have to put in $120,000, which is our estimate to replace the EFIS, which is the roofing space between the different levels of the roof. It's like a white material. It's all cracking. It needs to be taken out and replaced. The contingency and the soft costs, we're up around $1.9 million with those soft costs going in. The budget was $2,002,000. So we're going to be anywhere between $90,000 and $100,000 below what we submitted to the town. But these are good hard numbers. The low bidder is the same bidder that came in at South. We had a great experience with the contractor there. And it's the same contractor here, so we feel confident in the bid.
Brendan? Can you just remind us the kind of timeline and reasoning for replacing the roof now? I know there's been some comments in town around the town's broader capital budget, including ours. It'd be good to just get a sense as to, how critical it is this year. Can we stretch it out another year? Or, I obviously don't really want to go there because of the risk associated with leaking, but would love to get any thoughts you have.
Sure, and please add in whatever I missed. The roof is 25 years old. It's a 20-year roof, so it's well beyond its useful life by 25%. If you take a look at the roof, we went up on Friday and actually had a filming done of the roof, the conditions there with the architect. The conditions are significantly deteriorated over the last several years. There's a tremendous amount of cracking. So during the winter it hardens, but during the summer it opens wide up with the sun. And so the membranes are exposed because of that. And you'll see it if you get to see the film that we took. There's rippling. The whole roof, one whole section of the roof is rippled, which like like valleys of water that just come streaming through these ripples. And the ripples are 2 to 3 inches high. So the whole roof is really in desperate need of being replaced. There's 80 drains on the roof, and those drains, because the roofing around them is compromised, are taking in water. So the team has done a great job in preserving the roof over the last few years, so it remained useful, but it's at a point where it really needs to be replaced. It's very serious, actually.
Thank you.
Joanne, can you just, I think just as a further background fact that it'd be good to get out there is when we originally had this in the budget to do, because we postponed the East School roof, we postponed all the roofs at the request of the town previously. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons, we can't postpone it now.
It's been at least 5 years. It was on the list when I started here 5 years ago.
Right.
And the town asked us to delay it pretty much every year. Until last year, we started with South. Now East is due.
Right. And we've had engineers up on the roof to evaluate it and to share with us their feedback about the critical nature of this work.
Great. Thank you.
So we have I'll wait until the announcements of future business.
Any additional comments from the public?
One last thing. To answer, Staples High School in Westport is on the far end of town. I went there, and it's massive. Otherwise, they have more localized schools, but Staples is way on one side of town versus the other, so it takes a long time to get there. And Long Lots used to be K through 8. I believe it's K through 5 now. But it is one school that had to, at least at one point, deal with a lot of traffic in and out in a residential area. Shoot. I gave it to Mr. Kaskak. My daughter just couldn't do it. She couldn't get up, which I don't blame her. She's 7, but I'd like to read you what she wrote to do her justice. She said, "My name is Margot DeLippi, and I'm 7, and I'm in Miss Peckham's 2nd grade class at South, and I matter. My mom has to wake me every morning, and she begs me to go to sleep every night. At least it wasn't my job tonight. I just jumped 2 reading levels, and Miss Peckham, Mr. Butler, and Miss Molly, AKA Mrs. Smalley, for those who are here from South, all helped. If you change our school, Miss Molly probably won't be able to continue helping me or anyone else at South School, and I love Miss Molly. And I love walking to school with my brother, so if you change the start time, I will barely have time to get ready or walk to school. South is a long way from my home. Please leave South and Jack's school alone. Thank you." Now, I know she really hates change. I can't tell you how much, but what I want to impress is in all of this, and I'm so grateful for the teachers who are putting the kids first, but I am terrified at the loss of some of our staff. I know we have said that we will talk to the teachers and try to accommodate, but we all come from a business world. It's almost impossible. So I have not heard any of that specific feedback of, in the consideration of the school times, just how much of our staff we will lose. We have extraordinary teachers and administration in this town. So I urge you, with your consultant, not to actually start at a scenario A or B. You will always get a bias. Start with the principle, what we like is zero-based. As you said, zero-based is you start with no particular assumptions, and optimally, we're trying for nothing before 8 a.m. Start there and see how much farther you get back versus a bias in the front. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, looks like I'm back again. I just want to express that this whole process kind of has been very frustrating for me, because it seems like there's been a preconceived notion through the studies that have been found that 8:30 is the correct high school start time, and then everybody else will just have to figure it out or fall into place. The reason I say that is because people have been stressing, oh, well, high school kids need more sleep. There's been studies. Those same studies say that kids in elementary school need 3 to 4 hours more sleep. No one mentions that. I don't know why, but no one mentions that. People don't mention the fact also that some of the studies the studies on the other side is purely anecdotal. You say, well, I asked the teachers and they say that in the afternoon they're not as productive. Does someone consider that maybe students only have 5 or 6 hours worth of learning? And if you start them earlier, maybe they have 4 or 5 hours before they get tired and they don't have the endurance to go on. You can't assume that, oh, well, 3 o'clock, they get tired. Well, maybe it's not because it's 3 o'clock. Maybe it's because it's their 6th hour of learning. I don't think that's been considered, and if that's the only evidence on that side, it's kind of disappointing. And more importantly, I think this board is supposed to represent the desires of the town and the education system, right? There's been 2 surveys taken. The Hanover study, which was in June, at probably no small cost-payer expense, showed that this option that you're choosing is the most strongly opposed option of all the options. It's got the strongest opposition. So I don't know how we ended up here. I assume that option, that result was not to people's liking, because in October, there was another survey taken. And again, this option is the worst option. So I really, I'm struggling to figure out how we ended up here with high school students, 8:30, the rest of the kids, you shuffle around. Because somehow high school kids can't handle a 7:30 start time, but elementary kids can start at 7:45. So I'm just stressing that, please, reconsider and take into account all the students which you represent, not just high school students, but kids who are probably not as capable of dealing with sleep deprivation. Right? They're building a foundation of learning. They can't figure out why they can't get the answer right, why they can't focus. And that's the foundation you're building through middle school for them and through high school for them. And that's just all I want to really stress. So I'd like the board to really consider that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I'm Ann Shimmick. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you all so much for the hard work you've done. I know there are a lot of people that are new to the process, and I think the board has done an outstanding, the amount of feedback opportunities you have given people who are new to this process. I happen to be someone that has followed it now for almost 2 years. So it has been an enormous amount of work, and I'm just deeply grateful for all you've done. Your leadership on this issue, this is certainly one where I think we're hearing it's, possibly doing the right thing isn't something that's popular with everyone, and we all have very different family schedules in this town. But you are bringing our schools into compliance with the medical recommendations for our teenagers. So I actually don't have teenagers yet. So I have 2 kids that are still at South and one that's in Lower SAC. So, what we're talking about is really, what I live through every single day. So I guess, while you've heard a lot from people that it's not going to work for them, this is amazing for my family. I am thrilled with 7:45. So I actually have a son who is at wrestling tonight also. It finished at 6:45. And then I also have a daughter who plays Y-ball. My husband coaches that. He works in Lower Manhattan, so he leaves early so that he can get home in time to be at our 7 p.m. practice. So he picked up my son at 6:45, took his brother with him, coached my daughter from 7 to 8 p.m., and then my boys were home in bed by 8:15 tonight. They will be on time for South tomorrow. They'll actually could have been there by 7:45 tomorrow. So I guess I just really wanted you all to hear as you struggle with this decision that while it's difficult for some people, I happen to be one of many people that I know where it really will work well for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. All right, announcements and future business. Dr. Lutzy?
Sure. Just one brief announcement. We are meeting with the Board of Finance educational liaisons tomorrow afternoon at Central Office, which will give us an opportunity to run through the budget planning a bit, to talk about the decisions around the health insurance and the plan and the overall budget and all of that in advance of our meeting with the Board of Finance. I believe it's on the 11th. I think that's the night that we go to the Board of Finance. So next week we go to see them as well. So I wanted the board to be aware that with all of this going on, the budget process is continuing, and that meeting's in the afternoon and it's a public meeting if people are interested in attending.
Okay. With that, is there a motion to adjourn? Jen? Second? Penny? All in favor? Okay. Thank you.